Not far from the iconic Peggy's Cove Lighthouse, there's a trail you can take that will take you across the coastal barrens. And unlike many of the more popular trails in the area, this one actually takes you inland, away from the coast. Situated in West Dover Provincial Park, the Peggy's Cove Long Lake Trail is an adventure in any season, and it's where I'm on my walkabout today. West Dover Provincial Park was created in 2015. It covers 1,074 acres and overlaps the Peggy's Cove Preservation Area. Within West Dover Park, there are more than a dozen lakes. While I'm hiking the inland portion of the park, there is also a coastal section which includes 7 kilometers of coastline. Let's talk a little bit about lakes. There are 59 long lakes in Nova Scotia. You've heard me talk a bit about that before on these hikes. Now, interestingly, there are 2 of them in this park. I started this hike near Highway 333, and very close to the beginning, I'm walking along Long Lake, but this isn't the one that I'm headed to. The one I'm headed to is almost 3 kilometers as the crow flies, called Peggy's Cove Long Lake. Other lakes I will pass close by to on this journey include Powers Lake, Grassy Lake, First Lake, and Second Lake. If I went a little further than my plan today, I'd reach Third Lake. And if I'd hung a left instead of a right leaving the trailhead, my journey would have taken me to Canal Lake and Long Canal Lake, both of which you can see along the highway when you're headed from here to Peggy's Cove, which is more or less 3 kilometers from here. That's just 9 of the lakes in this park. There are over a dozen in total in this relatively small geographic area. West Dover was named for the coastal town in England named Dover, much like the other Dovers in Nova Scotia were named for that same town. But originally, this was called Ocean Glen in an act of the legislature, suggesting Scottish origins, but that name just didn't stick. The first European land grants were given in the 1770s to the Troop and Scott families, and by the 1800s, a permanent fishing village was established here, and with that came European immigration. Families with surnames such as Umlaw, Burlinger, Zink, Publicover, and others were part of the original settlement here. And those names are still common in the area today. As you can see from the landscape, this was not a place where people came for farming or forestry. Instead, it was proximity to good fishing grounds. Cod, haddock, mackerel, tuna, and other species were plentiful. These were the days before refrigeration, and so fish was salted and dried. Catches were sold in Halifax and shipped up and down the East Coast. In the early days, fishing was done from punts, which could be rowed from shore, or from 40-foot fishing schooners. With the coming of the 1920s, it was realized that those schooners could be used for something else, rum running. It was Prohibition time in the United States, and rum running was a dangerous but highly lucrative business for fishermen who otherwise worked very hard for a meager living. Fishermen would choose the darkest, cloudy, moonless nights for the best chance at avoiding being seen. They would sail along the coast and across the Gulf of Maine, all the way to New England. Now, they had a neat trick in the event that they were seen. They would wrap the bottles in salt, and if they thought they were in danger of being arrested, they would throw the bottles overboard, and the salt would cause the bottles to sink. There would also be cork wrapped around them. Now, as the salt dissolved in the ocean, the bottles would eventually float back to the surface with the help of the cork, and that alcohol could be recovered and taken to its destination. Another trick they would use is to put the rum bottles in barrels and cover them with salt cod. Again, so if they were caught and the barrels were opened, it would look like a load of fish. Rum running in Nova Scotia was big business. Shipyards up and down the coast repaired and built rum runners, and it was, for the most part, a legal business here. The problems didn't arise until you crossed the border into the United States. Some of the gangs even had agents here in Nova Scotia who would manage their affairs. Some gang leaders from New York even visited Nova Scotia to check on their operations. But it all came to an end on December 5th, 1933, when the United States lifted Prohibition. Over subsequent decades, a lot has changed in West Dover. The paved highway, the one still in use today, came in the 1940s, bringing with it easier access to Halifax and the amenities there. With the road came tourists, and with that, electricity and phone service. TV arrived in the mid-50s, and a post office opened. Life is quite different here now from what it once was. While many still rely on fishing for income, there are many others who commute from here to the city, something once unheard of. For most of those years, a fish plant operated in West Dover, strategically located next to the fishing grounds and the fishing fleet that operated from here. Then the cod collapse came in 1992, and that fish plant closed, throwing many people out of work. Many left the fishery altogether. But commercial fishing is still incredibly important here in West Dover. In fact, it is one of only a few of the small villages that still has a very active fleet. You can see that in the staging areas, the small wharves, and the government wharf here. It's no longer cod, it's lobster. Another thing that changed was the arrival of the tourists, and with the arrival of the tourists, it became important to protect this area. And so, in 1962, the Peggy's Cove Preservation Area was formed. More on that after the break.
Won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
I'm on the Peggy's Cove Long Lake Trail, headed to Peggy's Cove Long Lake. Now I have to distinguish that from Long Lake, which was the lake next where I started this hike. I'm hoping to get to Peggy's Cove Long Lake, but I'm not sure how close I'll make it to the edge, as the conditions can be quite boggy at times. But this is about the adventure. And this adventure will take me across both the Peggy's Cove Preservation Area and West Dover Provincial Park. The Peggy's Cove Preservation Area covers about 2,000 acres and was created in 1962 through an act of the legislature. The Peggy's Cove Commission Act prohibits development across an area stretching from Indian Harbor to West Dover. It also restricts how development occurs in the village of Peggy's Cove itself. The preservation area covers barrens, bogs, the lakes and ponds I've seen here, and the dramatic coastline. This area is a coastal barren, but it's also unique. Formed 400 million years ago, this landscape would have once looked like the mountainous areas of the Rockies or the Himalayas. All of this was created by a series of tectonic events and glacial periods which lifted up molten rock from the Earth's core and subsequently eroded them down, revealing the granite beneath the mountaintops. The timelines here are incredible. 400 million years ago, molten magma and tectonic movements creating mountains here. Then, over time, erosion and a series of glaciers. The most recent glacial event occurring only 20,000 years ago. These large granite boulders are called erratics, and they seem almost out of place here. They were deposited here by glaciers, by ice that, as it was crossing the landscape, became too tired to carry them anymore. In reality, what happened is the ice started to melt, and the ice just couldn't hold on to them anymore, and this is where they were left. A 1974 report talked about those glaciers and the uniqueness of this area, especially when it comes to a geological formation called roches moutonnées, or sheep rocks. These are rarely found this far south. If you look along some of the sloping landforms, or roches moutonnées, you can see the scars of glacial movement, and sometimes even tell which way the glaciers moved as they crossed this landscape, stripping the soil and vegetation, and leaving ice water to fill the holes, creating lakes and ponds. The smooth sloping side is where the glaciers came from, and the steeper side is the direction they traveled in. The scars are striations, and they are really not much different than if someone slid across a new wood floor with sand or gravel stuck in their shoes. The scratches you'd get on the floor are exactly like the scratches you find here in the rocks. This dark line here is an example of one of those striations. There is a lot to pay attention to on this barren. In 1974, a report noted just how important this area is as an example of the impact of wind and poor soil conditions on vegetation. Wind in particular, something called cromults. That is these short trees, misshapen trees as well. This is not the way you would normally see this kind of species. And this is because of the wind and the salt and the poor soils making it very difficult to grow. Now, that might make you think that the barren is really an uninhabitable place. But these plants and many animals that live here as well have found ways to adapt to the poor conditions. A couple of the plants that you see very commonly on the barrens, one is the heather, which is all over the place through here. And another is the bunchberry. Now, when you look at this very pretty flower, you may look and say, well, boy, that's a four-petaled flower. But in fact, these white pieces are actually leaves, and it is the center of this that is actually the flower. It goes without saying that this part of Nova Scotia is very popular with tourists exploring the coastline to see the Peggy's Cove Lighthouse, the Swissair Memorial Site, stopping for seafood at one of the amazing places along the route, and for some, to see the ocean for the first time. Some might say it's even too popular. But this area is also popular as a destination for astrophotography and viewing the northern lights. Nova Scotia has one of the darkest skies in North America, but so close to Halifax, it's often difficult to find places where you can get away from the light pollution of the city. Heading to southwest Nova Scotia, where you find dark sky preserves, is a bit of a drive from the city. So places like this, protected from development and far enough from the bright city lights, can be excellent places to stargaze and see the northern lights. Add into that the dramatic landscape here, and you have great opportunities for stunning photographs of the Milky Way and other celestial bodies. That's Peggy's Cove right there, the village and the lighthouse. And if you search online for Milky Way photos in Nova Scotia, you will often see them with the Peggy's Cove Lighthouse in the foreground. Now, when it comes to the Northern Lights and Aurora Borealis, we don't often associate those with Nova Scotia. They're certainly much more easily visible further north. But with a bit of patience and paying attention to some of the free Aurora apps and social media sites, you can see a spectacular display here. There are other trails which will bring you up to a view of Peggy's Cove Long Lake. One trail leaves from further up Highway 333 and travels near First Lake. Another much longer route comes in from Indian Harbor. From this look-off, you can also continue on finding your way further inland to Little and Big Chain Lakes. In all of these cases, your route will almost certainly be slightly different from the last person through. On a barren like this, there are often many possible trails, and you're often guided by what parts of the route are the least boggy and the most passable. But the point of this hike is to explore the barren, moving away from the coast, so any route is enjoyable and interesting. Well, I've reached my destination, which is the look-off over the Peggy's Cove Long Lake. You can see it there through the trees. This trail continues down, but as you do that, you'll actually lose your view of the lake. You can continue on to some other lakes, and you might even get relatively close to that lake if the bog allows you. This hike really shows you how much there is to explore on the land side of the Barrens away from the coast. There's somewhere else like this, Bootlear's Point, somewhere that you often go to see the coastline. But I'll be headed inland on the Mill Road towards the Ottermarsh Cliffs. That's after the break.
Be mine, feel the sunshine.
When you look online for the information about this trail, which is located in Bootlear's Point, you will find the names Ottermarsh Cliffs or the Scapper. But locals here call it the Mill Road because this once was a road that led to a shingle mill up on Porcupine Lake, which is about 3 kilometers to the north of here, just the other side of Highway 103 these days. But whatever you call it, it's where I'm on my walkabout today. Bootlear's Point was named for Jacques Bootlear, who arrived here in 1752. He arrived in Halifax aboard the English sailing vessel the Sally, which had a high mortality rate. Both his parents died on the ship, leaving Jacques and his siblings as orphans. He was considered an adult and after quarantine moved to Lunenburg before working his way back to St. Margaret's Bay and this area in 1772 with his own 11 children. He was given 5 acres of land in the area by Governor John Parr. Ultimately, he moved to Cox Heath, Cape Breton in 1811 and died in 1827 in nearby Sydney River. This is the Mill Road, and I joined it back at Willard Christie Memorial Park, where you'll find a ball field. Now across the street from there on Christie's Road, you'll find an outdoor rink. And that rink is very important in the community. Back in the winter of 1948-1949, the men of this community decided it was time to move hockey from the area lakes to a proper rink. Before the rink near the park, a first rink appeared on the shores of the Ingram River, near where a lumber mill at the time had a large sawdust supply, something which was important to create a bed to stop water from simply flowing away. Ice quality issues meant a new location had to be found, and the current rink was built over the winter of 1954 and 1955 on land acquired from Willard Christie, who had land stretching from the shore to quite a ways inland, largely following what is now Christie's Road. The ice surface was 175 feet by 75 feet and had overhead string lights. It was said to be as large as the ice surface at Madison Square Garden in New York City. At a time when travel outside the community was difficult, especially in winter, it was the center of community activities. By the 1960s, the rink was starting to show its age, and it was time for some renovations, so the community put in a new concrete base and new boards. Now, with improved transportation links to Halifax, many of the local minor hockey clubs had moved to indoor arenas like the St. Margaret Centre. But for those who just want a nice time out on the ice, well, that community rink to this day still operates and is still run by the community. Willard Christie, for whom the park was named, and who seems to have been a central figure in Bootlear's Point, was born in 1893. His death certificate listed him as a lumberman in 1965, but while he was likely involved in lumbering earlier in life, just like so many in this area, one of his last jobs was checking on dams on the area rivers for Bowater Mersey, which was an enormous pulp and paper operation on the South Shore right up until about a decade ago. Well, over the entire duration of this relatively short hike, I've actually been climbing, but I've now reached the steepest and what I actually think is the prettiest part of this hike, which is the last 80 feet of vertical to the top of the cliff. As I've traversed through the forest, I've crossed areas of all different types of ground, from bog to trail to rock. While much narrower now, the Mill Road was once an extremely important route for people in Bootlear's Point, both to get to work at various shingle and sawmills, and also to haul wood for their own purposes off their land to home. There is a story of one person hauling wood in the early spring and the ground being too wet during an unseasonable thaw, making the road soft under the sunny days. They ended up rigging up headlights to their sled and hauling the wood out at night. when the road was more solid. This forest has been relied on by generations for income and the needs of everyday living by so many in this area. I mentioned there were a few different names for this trail. I've left the Mill Road and I've arrived at the Ottermarsh Cliffs, or the Scapper. And that name for these rocks comes from the climbers that just absolutely love this spot. I'm not a climber, but I'm told there are 20 or so known routes up the sheer rock face here. Those routes have been given all sorts of interesting names like Careful with the Axe and Dead Dog Do. There are all sorts of different types of climbing, but I'm told this place is popular with traditionalists who use ropes and anchors to assist on the way up and, of course, from falling down. So this is the trail, and at this point it's still not too bad, some scrambles and so forth. But as I look up that way, it is quite covered in hurricane debris, and trying to remove that while scaling a cliff doesn't seem like a great idea, but I'm gonna go up and see how far I can get, but I'm not sure I'll be making it all the way to the top. Hurricane Fiona in 2022 was a powerful Category 4 storm. It was the most costly and intense tropical storm to hit Canada. The impact on trails across the province has been quite extreme, with the destruction still evident 2 years on. Sometimes, like on my journey today, you really don't know what you're facing until you reach a part of the route that just isn't safe to continue on, and so you adjust. Well, I made my way up the backside of the Scapper, or the Ottermarsh Cliffs, at least as far as I feel it's safe to get to. There's a lot of hurricane blowdown in this area, and so it's very tricky to get beyond this. At one time, I will go and look and see if there are easier routes to get to the top, but that's not for today. In the distance, I can see Ingramport Harbor, where the timber from these woods used to be taken to be shipped overseas and to elsewhere. A lot of people who lived in this area once worked in the forest industry, not so much these days. Harrison Ford once remarked that he wanted to be either a coalman or a forester because he saw his father working in an office, and that's just not what he wanted to do. Well, up here, I can see the attraction. You know, just nature as far as the eye can see, and peaceful, a lot more peaceful than being in an office. If you work in an office, I hope on your next walkabout, you get a chance to escape to nature.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine. Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Feel the sunshine.